If you are conducting AI transformation in your HR shop, this is not an episode that you want to miss. I have been talking about AI since 2020, and I just had my mind blown by today's guest, which is Kat. They are one of the leading data nerds, and this is what I love about them. And what we do is we actually go in and unpack what is the real problem with transformation. And you're going to be very surprised. I'm going to give you a hint. It all starts with a job description. And let's just scrap job description, because what they describe as the way of the future, job description doesn't even come close to it. So let's dig in. Welcome to the channel. I am Trent Cotton, the human capitalist. I've noticed that there's a big difference between HR business practices and how business actually gets done. I've spent over 20 years in HR helping the C-suite rebuild their organization while the world around them shifted. I've designed this channel to be an intelligence briefing on the business of people. So, if you're a CEO, board member, or a CHRO looking for the signal in the noise, welcome to the channel. Now, let's get to work. All right, welcome back to the Human Capitalist Podcast. I am your host, Trent Cotton, and I am joined today by the one and only Kat. This has been a long time coming.
Yeah, it really has. I feel like we're like two planets in the same solar system, and it's about time we just sat down and talked state of the solar.
Yeah. Well, and it is funny because I know, was it Vegas? I don't know. There was something. We saw each other like on the conference whirlwind that is usually the spring and usually the fall. And we kept going, we need to hang out. We need to hang out. So finally have it done. So thank you for making the time. I know you said that you have a busy April coming up. You want to tell people where you're going to be so they can come check you out?
Yeah. So at the end of last year, I wrote a book called The Bounce Back Factor. And this spring, I'll be talking about it a lot because it turns out that every team has realized that resilience isn't optional and that knowing how to navigate uncertainty is probably the skill that's worth investing in. So I will be going from Alaska to New Jersey and quite a few states in between doing that talk track for some teams and events.
Okay, so you win the award for like the most random place, Alaska. That is insane. Oh God.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't do that.
I have spoken in Alaska 3 times in the last 5 years. I've been really lucky that they've invited me back. Every time I've come out with a new topic, they're like, all right, come on back. Tell us about it. And that's just been one of those really cool perks of putting ideas out into the world in hopes that it makes teams better, which is kind of the point of speaking.
It is. And, for those of us that have written books, it seems easy because we're just out there, hey, look at this. I mean, there's a lot of time and thought and investment. And I've never given birth, but, and I feel kind of weird saying, but it's like birthing something, like you're growing it and then like you're putting it out into the world. And I think one of the few things is being able to take that message to the street and get to meet people and talk one-on-one about it. And you're a phenomenal speaker. I mean,
Thank you.
I have heard you several times, and I love how much thought and preparation you put into your sessions. I'm a very harsh critic in the audience, mainly because, whenever I get on stage, I know people are judging me. So I'm like, well, I'm going to judge whoever's on there. You always deliver.
Thank you. Thank you so much, because it's really been something that it put a lot of effort into over time. And something I'm really proud of. And like you said, people don't get to see the behind the scenes. They don't get to see that if you choose to be a speaker, you get rejected more than anybody. And, and the hours of practice and delivery, because like that compliment of, well, you made it look so easy. I think that's the ultimate mark of someone who has invested a lot of effort into that.
Well, it does not go unnoticed for those of us that know the amount of work and preparation that it takes, and also to the passion, to be able to do all of the prep and everything and not lose the passion that only Kat can bring to the topics that you do. So very well done.
Thank you.
Are you ready to get into some current news before we dive into our topic?
Always, especially lately, the headlines have been extra wild. So
They have been nuts. I had Brian Fink on last week, and we were talking about reverse recruiting, and Brian's very kind of he's always very boisterous, but rarely do I ever see him like with his nerve hit, and that topic hit a nerve with him, and so I had a lot of fun kind of poking it around. But so let's talk about the organization, the four-letter word. I don't really particularly care for them, but sometimes they do put out some interesting articles, and this one is from SHRM. It's called The Future of Work, and that it's personal. And it talks about how AI is actually reshaping the employee experience. And I thought this was really interesting because, we've talked a lot about how it's affecting TA and how it's affecting maybe workforce planning. And I think that the missing piece has been, well, how do we handle the training and the employee experience? What were your thoughts on this?
I feel like I heard a lot of the trends that you're going to hear every time you scroll LinkedIn lately. A lot of
Yeah.
the, oh, it's changing everything. But behind the scenes, when I'm having these conversations, I feel like the part we're not saying out loud is that employee distrust is on the rise.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
And every time we talk about a trend, that's kind of the little voice that's screaming in my head is like, but if people don't trust this process, this is a great idea with absolutely no runway inside of
Hmm.
organizations. And so I think it was one of those articles that just like every article we read lately, it's like, I want to add that little hold on, wait, because we have
Hmm.
to start questioning how much these people want the change and how it
Yeah.
impacts their life, not just the trends that are driving change in HR right now.
Yeah. It's, I'm glad you brought that up because the last several speaking things that I've done on site with clients and at conferences, I've always said that any implementation, whether it's a new process or a new technology, where I see HR really tripping over the finish line is with the adoption. They're like, let's celebrate. Yay, we launched it. I'm like, well, let's celebrate it in about 90 days and see how many people are actually using this. And is it bettering? Are we seeing some difference in the KPIs? But one thing that I did like, that I am hopeful for. This is one of those where I want to go. I'm kind of like you. I'm like, I don't want to get too excited, but God, if this were to work, it says AI powered HR platforms are reshaping employee experience by offering personalized career pathing. Like this has
Yeah.
been a passion of mine since I got into HR of going, here you are, here's where you want to be. Now let's work together to get you there. And we've been so constrained by processes and time. Do you think that AI can finally open this up for HR professionals?
If we are willing to be facilitators and conductors and change agents when it comes to bureaucracy.
Mm,
I've been in this world consulting teams for over 10 years now, right? And so the first chunk, for people who don't know me, I spent a lot of my time writing job postings. And I got to tell you, Trent, I had all the data in the world. I literally did a 100-year research study of job postings, okay? I did not come empty
we had
handed
job
when I
postings
make
for 100 years. Like that's
there's been
news
job
to me.
postings since the 1920s and they have not changed drastically. And what I did
Interesting.
is I aligned benchmarks, so samples from each of those
Hmm.
decades, and I aligned them to what was happening in society at that time to see if any of the changes reflected bias,
Hmm.
right? If the evolution of job postings is actually driven by society and how corporations change, not by work. And that's ultimately what I found. And therefore, it's really easy to draw a dotted line between the bias that existed in the 1920s that we say is gone and the
Hmm.
tactics that we use in our job postings to attract talent and tell people if they're qualified or not. Now, I bring all of this up because I want people to understand just how informed the perspective was, and people still
Hmm.
said no. And the reason they said no is because they weren't ready to manage the change across hiring managers. They
Hmm.
didn't think they could make a massive shift across their company. Their company wasn't ready. I'm sure some people are nodding right now
Oh,
because we have all heard that. They're not
yeah.
ready, right?
Hmm.
And I think if this level of personalization is also a dream of mine, as somebody who was very type A and driven and wanted to grow, but never could see the line, never could itemize what I needed to do to get up there. I just knew that I had to work harder, and that was toxic in itself.
Very.
that has to change. That bureaucracy around promotions, the visibility, all of that. If recruiters can drive that level of visibility into roles and skills and development over time, I think this is the most beautiful outcome we could get from AI.
No, I agree, and it's funny whenever I got into HR coming from the line of business, I worked for a regional bank. This was in the early 2000s, and their HRBPs would actually go in market to like branches or
Mhm.
to different departments, and they had, remember Twister? You know,
Yeah.
you kind of folded this whole thing out. Well, they had something like that that looked, now looking at it, was like a product journey almost, but it was a career journey, and they
Mhm.
kind of talked through like, here's the different levels. Now it was very vertical. It didn't look at cross functionally. How could you get out of branch banking into financial management or into commercial banking? It was just, here's kind of the track. But even then, I thought, oh, wow, this is cool because it helped visualize. And I think, again, I'm very hopeful, but I'm like you. I've heard we're not ready, or you don't know our organization from the consulting. You don't understand how our organization works. I'm like,
We're
I could probably,
layered.
yeah, we're layered. That's it. We're a very complex organization. I'm like, but do you have to be? That's the big question. So I do hope, though, because my utopia for like looking at the front end of an employee coming in is that once they start, imagine how cool it would be that like day 30, they get an agent that is assigned to them that says, hey, I've looked at your resume. How was your first 30 days? Get some of that, raw feedback about their onboarding and their immersion. But then going, hey, I've got your resume here. Let me open up the book. Here's everything that you can do in the company. What interests you? And then being able to map that through, because it's like we forget when people start with us, they're like, well, we don't know what their experience is. You have their resume. Like, I
You
don't
spent
understand.
weeks talking to them.
I don't understand. Like, it's like my brain just kind of frazzes out a little bit. I know it's like all over my face. So I'm hoping that AI can actually come in and do some of this type of stuff. So what are you seeing in the market? Because I know you've got a very nice cross functional or cross industry view. Are you seeing anybody that's looking at how to leverage AI in the experience space?
I wish. I feel like we're very
I
much in the
wish.
unitasker land right now. And what I mean by
Right.
unitaskers is, you know how you go on someone's wedding registry and you see something like a strawberry husker, and you're like,
Mm,
why in the hell? Of all the things that you could ask for from anybody, you asked for this one thing that can only do one thing, right?
right.
I think that is the era of innovation, and I'm air quoting that because I don't think you can call that innovation, that we are
Right.
squarely in right now, where we are
Mhm.
picking unitasks. So people who say they're using AI, they're using one system to do one thing, and it completes
Mm.
that one step. And in most cases, I actually think if people took that 10,000-foot view, they would see that they're spending more time getting the bot to do the right thing than they would if they just did it themselves, which is a little bit frustrating from my perspective as the person who's watching all of these people say efficiency, and then you see what they post and you're like, I don't think you
That's
can call
not,
that
yeah.
efficient. That's
We have
bad.
different definitions of efficiency.
Good quality results were the thing
Yes.
that we were aiming for. Speed was never
Yeah.
the problem.
Yeah. But it's funny you bring up something that I've heard a lot, and I did a video on. It's called AI fatigue. And what we're seeing in the data is that, to your point, there's all of these AI, hey, we're doing this and we're adding this, and it speeds this process up, but they're not accounting for the human that has to go back and fix some of the mistakes, catch, number one, catch the mistakes, but then has to go back in and do the retraining and do all of that other kind of stuff. They're just kind of looking at that quick hit and not looking at the long tail, which I think is kind of short sighted.
100%. And I also think it will misguide your investments because you'll start to emphasize speed over results. And
Mm,
like I said, speed was never the issue. Truly, when you
yeah,
look at a recruiting process, I have never seen a recruiting process where the pace was the problem. There's
mm,
always a pace. The
yeah,
data is the problem. The clarity is the problem. The recruiting with retention in mind is the problem, right? And when we
yes.
address problems, that's when we actually get the outcomes we want. Again, speed doesn't align with any of the things that you need.
No, and it's funny, the kind of the thing that I always said in HR was you cannot sacrifice speed for quality or quality for speed. Two things can be true at the same time. And it just like I would just let it sit because you can kind of see like their their circuits kind of, because they look at it very binary. And sometimes, if you're in a very complex organization, you can't look at things in a very binary way. So
Yes.
I've got some reservations. I'm hopeful. Again, I,
Well,
I try to be optimistic, but I'm cautiously optimistic because you and I both have been around the bend a couple of times to see how this works.
yeah. Well, and you just hit on something that I think most people, again, we're kind of missing the depth behind the questions that are being asked right now, and the way that the headlines are scaring people is that we're not contextualizing. And you just hit on quality. Okay. Yesterday, I posted on LinkedIn, how do you define quality of hire? And not one person could tell me.
Oh, no, 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 no.
AI is shaking us loose. And
Yes.
I am watching it with this like bated breath because in the back of my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, we are automating bias right now. That's all we're
Oh,
doing. We are
mm,
automating bias at scale because I have yet to meet a recruiting professional who can define quality, who can tell me how they have benchmarked candidates against one another without using completely superficial information that was
mhm.
collected by biased sources, weighted incorrectly, and then chosen outcomes. And then they say, we hired the best person. And if I ask, how do you know, more than twice, they can't answer me.
So you can't get down to the five whys?
It's barely 1.5 wise. Okay.
One and a half. At least you gave them the extra little half as a bonus point.
So close.
Just a half. You're so close.
Right.
That is interesting though. But you bring up bias, and I do have concerns. However, on the flip side of that, at least with technology, I can audit the bias. I can go through and I can see and then go in and fix it. And to me, it's just kind of funny because I hear a lot of HR professionals, and I'm sure when you talk about AI at a conference or something, inevitably, as soon as I get done, I go, okay, are there any questions? In my mind, I'm going 5, 4, 3, and I see the hand. I'm like, let's talk about bias. Like I can just cut them off at the pass. And it's so funny, like everybody's so worried about that. And that is a very legitimate concern. However, are we going to talk about the human bias that has been in our process, apparently, according to your research, for 100 years? Like, I can't go through and audit that. My gut's telling me that it's there, but at least with the AI, I've got some type of a data set that I go, here's the problem, and here's how we need to
Yes.
fix it. Like, how do you feel about that? Because I know you do a lot of research in this area.
Yeah. Uh, the first big shift that we have to make, and this it goes back to our conversation about bureaucracy, right? Is
Mhm.
that we start to change the benchmarks. So we start to change the benchmarks into things that actually translate into positive work. It's not years of experience, it's the project you completed at the scope and scale. And then using that data to inform the entire process. I think recruiting has suffered from silos, right? Where the job post
Right.
is a silo, the interview is a silo, the onboarding is a silo, the learning and development is
Mhm.
a silo, right? And when we
Yeah.
heard about AI, we're like, ding, ding, it's all going to connect. But the data isn't the same across the
Right.
board. And so the big shift that I'm working a lot on right now is better templates, better systems that become something that live with someone from the day they apply to the job, to the interview, to the
Mhm.
recommendations, and all the way through their process. And I think that's kind of my ideal vision, and what I think is missing from most plans right now is that currently most technology companies are building tools for the silo. And so now we're going to have AI that's a silo to a silo to a silo to a
Right.
silo.
Right.
But if we had data that transferred all the way over, that's where we start to actually inform each of these.
Mm. And it's interesting to me how we created our departments, and like I've never thought about in the recruiting spot that there are silos even within the process. So thank you for that. That's going to be a mental ninja in my head all day. But I think if I listen to what you're saying, I take a step back. I'm applying AI and I'm applying them in silos, but expecting them all to talk to each other and to create this efficiency. So it's like, when are we going to learn the difference between transformation, which is taking something old, enhancing it, helping with the efficiency? That's transformation. That is not innovation, which is building something completely new that has never been there. And I hate how people use those two terms
Yes.
interchangeably.
Yes. Now you just planted a seed in my brain because that, I think that's what's making me so frustrated right now.
Mhm,
And really, we've had multiple chances at this. Like in 2020, I actually just wrote about this week. In 2020, we had a chance to change everything, right?
mhm,
We could
yeah,
have built workplaces that were 100% remote. We could have built workplaces where we all had deep trust for each other. We could have made them safe places for your mental health. Like, I mean, we all got screwed up at the exact same time. That was the moment. That was the
yeah,
springboard, right? And we
yeah.
didn't do it. We didn't do
What
it.
the defibrillator, like whenever the heart has got all these confusing electrodes, those paddles basically just resets and says, "Hey, let's everybody get on the same page here." And I think that's we had so many greats, the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle. We should have had the Great Reset.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm,
And now the thing that's standing between all of these companies and their AI aspirations is not technology, it is bureaucracy. It is
mhm,
choosing to stay the same and expecting different results. Expecting that
yeah,
if we just plug this in, pull that out, move this person, cut this bottom line, that somehow we will build a better tomorrow, and that is not real. Right?
mm,
That's like the people who live their whole life thinking one day it'll just be easy. Oh, I'll work hard and one day I won't have any problems. No, that's not real, right?
no,
Like that's not how life works. You build endurance, you build resilience, you learn how to
right,
navigate uncertainty, but you do not get to experience a life with no uncertainty. And
no,
companies are behaving that way. They're behaving like they can control something and we're just in a math game, and that is the real requirement, and that's what's going to drive innovation ahead,
mhm.
not just the transformation that everybody is like putting in Halloween costume right now.
And it's funny. I was on site with a client, and I was walking through like a journey map, and it's funny because I was doing the 5 whys with them, and I could tell, and I'm sure you've led a similar thing. You can tell that level of discomfort of going, why are you asking me this? Why are you asking me this? And then I introduced to them something that whenever I went through agile and design thinking, one phrase, well, there were two, that just kind of completely transformed how I looked at business. One of them was kind of manifesting something that I always felt, but I never really felt the words, which is the one closest to the client is the one that solves the problem. Not 16 levels up. The one who is actually closest to the client or closest to the problem should have the ultimate decision. And then the other one was fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Because what I was finding
Yes.
with this client, and this is, I know you do this in change management, it's they identify the first level of the problem. They go, let's start solution. They're like, no, 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 no. Stop solutioning. Come back here. Let's fully vet this out. And I think that I'm seeing this, and as AI is doing what it always does, it's doing that problem at scale. It's like, oh, slap this on. And we're going to have this Frankenstein of a tech stack that, to your point, is just going to exacerbate all of the issues that we haven't dealt with, but at scale.
Yes. And it shines a magnifying glass on the fact that we have very uneven education across our industry.
Mm,
Because if anyone has used AI, you know that the answers are sometimes right. The
sometimes, right.
assumption that they are right and the lack of curiosity or critical thinking to say, is that the right assumption?
Mm,
That is what's going to cause a lot of headaches before we reach this ideal place. Because if you don't know that that's not the best way to do this, if you don't know that saying, I came across your resume and I'm interested in your background is not ever going to get someone to respond, then
right.
you might automate that at scale and use it across
Mhm.
100,000 emails. You think you're
I
faster.
I actually sent someone something yesterday. They sent it to my work email address about, I don't remember what it was, but my response to them, I have a saved response, a saved signature that says you might want to check your AI. Because it was
That.
like, something about mortgage. Like I haven't worked in the mortgage industry since, I mean, my daughter's going to be 23 since she was one, so 22 years ago,
Wow.
you know. But it's funny that you brought up the whole education aspect of it, because the next article I threw at you was the Forbes top 10 HR trends, and number one was AI literacy is becoming the baseline enterprise skill. And I just love the fact that you kind of called that out. It was really interesting, though. It said AI literacy has risen more than 70% in job postings from a year ago. And that's according to the CEO of LinkedIn.
Asterisks, only in software jobs.
Really?
Yep. Okay, so this was one of those articles that I was like,
so you just saw me crack out because I'm going, did they cite that? That would have been interesting information to know.
I'm a nerd, Trent.
I love that about
So
you.
I think this is the benefit of being someone who has chosen a job to be a writer and a thinker. And I use that to help companies. But I consider my primary job to be a critical thinker in this space. And as I was reading this article, literally there were so many points where I was like, that data point is missing the second sentence. I've seen that report, or the report about entry-level jobs and, replacement and everything. That's actually not a disruption. The unemployment rate of entry-level workers hasn't changed at all in the last 5 years. But if you read the headlines, you're probably throwing up for your poor college grad.
Yes. And the whole AI is taking entry-level jobs. My whole pushback is it though? Because quite honestly, AI is forcing us to have a conversation about these early career jobs that we should have had 20 years ago. Why are you going to hire someone right out of school, top of their class, and put them in a file room?
Yeah.
That's not an early career. Like, you're missing the opportunity of AI coming in and augmenting this individual and lessening that ramp up time for ROI on that early career from 18 months to what do you think? Like 18, 24 months is usually what I kind of saw before they kind of got their sea legs and they were actually producing. You could probably strip that down in half. But no, let's talk about how AI is taking jobs, because we have no data to support that.
None. And it just, my head spins looking at these data points, because again, I just feel like what we're doing is we're dragging people's eyes. And this is a technique that people use in propaganda. And I know that word feels a little strong and political right now, I'm sure, but truly, like, it is a propaganda technique to take your eyes and point you at something that distresses you as we're introducing new information.
Yeah, it's a shock value.
Exactly. And I'm just so exhausted because can we just take a 10,000-foot view and stop pretending that the last 6 months is going to predict the next 6 years? Because that's never been the case. We have 10, 15, 20-year lag data to inform what's coming. And I promise everybody, transformation is not going to happen overnight. You're not going to wake up one day and AI will have all the jobs. I promise you. And it won't even happen fast. It won't be 6 weeks. It won't be 6 months. And you want to know why? Bureaucracy.
Right.
It is our comfort blanket.
It is the one time that you can actually be thankful for bureaucracy.
That. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny, to be at this part in your career where, from my 20s to probably 10 years ago, I'm like, speed up. And like the last 4 or 5 years, I'm like, slow down. And you actually wrote about something not too long ago, because I ingest your content religiously, but you said $1 billion data issue, that we have $1 billion data issue because so much of AI is relying on clearly outlining what a role is.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that? Because I read it and paused, and it's like, okay, I'm not going to send her a LinkedIn message. We need to talk about this in real life.
Yep. So I actually am doing a hour-long presentation on this topic because I think there are a lot of pieces to this that we just have never thought about, because we've had a good enough culture around data for a long time. And what I mean by a good enough culture is that in the world of HR and recruiting, if we had data, that was good. And if we had a decent job post that wasn't wildly embarrassing or making people take screenshots and post them on Twitter, like, that's good, right? If someone qualified applied, we were good. We were happy. If the hiring manager didn't yell at us, 2 thumbs up, I'm winning, right? And now that is the first step of almost every single AI application for recruiting that I've seen. So You open up the tool. What's the first thing they do? Post a job. You open it up and they say, do you want an AI generator job or do you want to copy and paste the job post you have? Now, everybody pause for just 1 minute. Do you think that thing that was just good enough for you to copy and paste, change 4 words, and just not be embarrassed by is high quality data? Right? Like at what
Mhm.
point? But then this is where it gets really complicated. So remember we were talking about those silos.
Mhm.
So those silos were okay before. But if you have an aspiration of actually creating a connected experience in which you use high quality data to inform each step, that first job post data point becomes really, really important. Because if you get that wrong, you didn't just screw up a recruiting process that you can edit and repost on Indeed. Now you've screwed up a data point that follows someone throughout their whole career. So
Mhm.
now I've screwed up the interview. So we actually recruited the right person for the wrong data.
Mm.
Then we've onboarded the wrong skills to the right role. Then we're career pathing this person based off of the wrong match, right? And it becomes
Wow.
really, really layered, and the liabilities and problems become expansive.
I never thought about that. And that, play that out, that affects retention, that affects the team morale, production, revenue. I mean, wow.
And if all these projections about how the future workforce is going to shrink, which I
Mhm.
think it will in some way,
Mhm.
if it all shrinks, how much more valuable is one person? If I'm one person that now coordinates 15 key business tasks where you used to have 15 people, if one person quit on a 15-person team, oh, okay, we'll backfill them. You two will take over. What happens when one person quits who's doing 15 jobs?
Right. Yeah.
It,
Screeching halt.
that. And now businesses cannot function, right? Customer service cannot
Mhm.
function, marketing cannot function. And now, you know how companies react to that? We're going to roll right back to our bureaucracy. We're going to build the same team that we had before because we're too scared that if we lost one, that we would lose everything.
So define what a quality data source is.
Yeah. So ultimately, I think when it comes to quality data sources around work, we need to be really critical, but we also need to create kind of a multi-layered approach to get the highest quality data. So it's the hiring manager intake where you talk about the
Mhm.
role and really collect all of that information from a first person narrative. It's
Okay.
the performance review of the person who's doing that job right now. Because that's literally saying, like, this is good. This is what you did that was good. And we can
Mhm.
distill from there. I think there's also other layers, and every company has a little bit different of this, right? It's the assessments that you've done, it's all of
Right.
these data points that you used at some point, the interviews that you ran last time, the benchmarking. It's probably not the job post you have, though. And that is the fundamental problem that I think most people are hopping right past is they're like, oh, I have the old job post. That's my starting point of creating the new job post. But if you're going to tell me that everything's changing and that we don't expect work to look like this in the next 6 months and that we're looking for people who are innovative, why are you using the same hiring criteria you used 3 years
Yeah.
ago when you hired
Yeah.
this job?
Mm. That's funny. Whenever I worked in banking, this was, I think, 2014, 2015, somewhere around there. I took over the retail recruiting in addition to um, the professional side of the house. And it was interesting. I mean, I started as a teller 96, 97. So, I kind of knew the retail world having worked in it. And I remember pulling up because we were having some retention issues with the branch managers. And so I pulled up the job description. This is 2015, 16, somewhere in there. And in the job description, it said ability requirement, an ability to work a 10 key calculator. And I just circled it and put it up on the screen. I was like, why is this here? Do we still have 10 key calculators? Because I worked on it back in the 90s. I know what you're talking about, but like, and it just started this whole thing of going, okay, well, if that doesn't need to be there, what else should we get rid of? What do you think is preventing organizations from actually stopping and going, okay, let's do this the right way?
Yeah. Personally, I think the format of job postings is standing in the way. It's the fact that we're still trying to
How
write
so?
this like narrative style document, and that is not the strong suit of corporate America, right? We're not
Right.
great writers. We being
No.
the collective, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's about actually creating some really simple infrastructure. And this is something that I'm working on right now. And I've tested at quite a few companies and it works, but you need to streamline it down to something that anyone can understand and the real dimensions of work. Because if I give you a blank piece of paper and I say, write a job post, you're probably going to start as a marketing manager at
Right.
our company based in New Jersey. We da 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 da. Right? That's not actually what I need to know as an employee. And that's not what the hiring manager needs to know when they're assessing me. And so those benchmarks that I've kind of narrowed this down to and kind of the infrastructure that I work with is autonomy. They need to know if they work by themselves or they work with other people. Who are those people?
Okay.
What are their jobs? The next one is the actual like tasks, projects. So this is what tools do you use and what do you do with the tools? Okay. Autonomy
Hmm.
in this one and aptitude, they kind of like blend together a little bit. But again,
Yeah.
you kind of need to know that autonomy piece to know where they sit inside of the organization and kind of the leveling. That's why we include that one. The next one is communication. Who do you talk to? Who do you present ideas to? What are those ideas? How complex are they? And the last one is people. So team leadership. Have you managed a team? How many people? In what capacity? Right? And so
Hmm.
if I give someone a chart with those 4 categories, I explain very deeply what's in each of them. And I say, I want you to map the role back into this. I get a much stronger data point that I can use for automation, matching, connection, quality, and
Hmm.
something the candidate can actually understand. Because you know what doesn't go in there? 4+ years experience working with a 10 key calculator.
Right.
Because
Right.
you got to think about it, right?
Yeah. And it's funny, as you were going through that, Cat, I was already thinking, okay, well, if this, then that, I ask this to evaluate.
That.
Like that's immediately where my mind went. I
And
like that flow.
Well, and it becomes, sorry, this is my nerd topic, as everyone can
Go
probably tell
for
by
it.
the pitch of my voice. But like, so now we have a baseline chart. Now, when I assign interviews, I can say, hiring manager 1, you're responsible for aptitude. Here's what you're assessing.
Hmm.
Design questions that, oh, AI opportunity, because I can actually do that when I give clear benchmarks of what we're assessing.
Right.
Oh, now we're going to compare candidates. I can use that chart. I can put every candidate side by side and actually compare
Hmm.
their skills across each of those benchmarks, score, and have a quality of hire benchmark. Quality
Mm.
against skills assessed. Oh, now we're going even cooler. We go into the organization. I can level you with that. I can show you the
Mm.
difference between you, manager, and director on a clear 4-pillar benchmark. I can show you line by line what you need to do to get the next job. And now we've filled it all in, learning and develop. I mean, if I
It
were going to
all
build a
falls into
technology
place.
product, that's what I would do. The problem right now is that most people are simply not qualified enough to plug that data in the first place, and their systems are not sophisticated enough to apply that data at scale because it's not built into the applicant tracking system or the data systems that exist right now.
Mm.
It's a huge
I'm-
bureaucratic change.
It is. And I'm going to text you later on tonight, whenever I'm still pondering over this. Because I love that. And what's so sad though is that on the surface, it's pretty simple. It's a simple redesign. Like, but then I think of all the complexities, like, we were talking about before, not just the bureaucracy, but we're creatures of habit. We kind of like to do the things that we've always done,
Yep.
and I think that's where the complexity comes in. It's not in the design, because what you explained would take a hell of a lot less time to develop,
Yeah.
because I'm not writing this beautiful narrative that can win an Emmy or an Oscar for how it was written. Interesting. Do you have any companies that are kind of tinkering with this idea of going, hey, I want to try this?
Yeah. So I am I'm developing it requires for every company to kind of adapt to their system. Because the other complexity here, and this is what I'm finding with my current client that's working on this, is that we also have a split talent market, meaning we have the jobs that you and I read about all the time on LinkedIn where they're like looking for a marketing director and all of that.
Yeah.
But on the other side of it, we have jobs where there is no pipeline. There are no truck drivers to hire right
Yeah.
off of the street. There is not a great pipeline of nurses to plug into these businesses.
Yeah,
And
and
that
Ford CEO just came out and said, he goes, I have 5,000 factory jobs that I can't fill because there's not a workforce out there for them.
exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. And I think that is one of the challenges where, again, and you know this, no recruiting solution is one size fits all. But
No.
maybe, right, as we enter into this era where we should be changing everything, where we have all the tools to change everything, I think pretending there's a one size fits all answer is the first thing that's probably going to need to change.
Mm. So if I'm a C-suite member, CHRO, talent leader listening to this, and I agree with what you're saying, what's like an easy first step that I can make to help start making this transition?
Yeah. So I, I'm biased, but I really do think the first thing you need to do is consult with an expert who actually has a wealth of understanding of how this works.
Mhm.
And I would bet money that your skills based hiring consultant from the HR tech company ain't it. Because what they are trying to tell you is that there is a one size fits all solution for all of the skills inside of your business.
Uh-uh.
This is complex. You're going to need a lot of data. And what you're going to need is that person who says, wait, is that answer right?
Right.
That's kind of the first step to start to build the business case, is to really deeply understand your business and why these skills are causing the problem, and looking at your pipeline issues, then using that infrastructure to run a pilot. That's my current recommendation for every single team I work with right now, is we actually build all the templates based off of the systems that you already have, but with the added contextualization elements and new
Mhm.
systems. Then we run a pilot on your hardest to fill role, both the one with a big pipeline and the other one with zero pipeline.
Oh, wow. So you're
Then,
getting two extremes.
exactly. So
Yeah.
you run multiple pilots at once, which we have never done in the world of recruiting because that scares everybody. And then
Right.
you roll it out to your team first by doing training, not tools. That is,
Mm.
I have to stand on that soapbox a little too often, is the fact that you will never, ever, ever get recruiters to accept a tool that says it's going to replace them without training them first. Please,
Agreed.
please stop rolling out tools without training. So I
Yeah.
think it's really about deeply understanding the problem, building new templates and processes that actually allow you to scale this all the way across. So we're not just working in the silo, running intense pilots, highly
Mhm.
measured, focused on quality metrics that impact what you discovered in round one, and then training and execution.
And I want to talk to the C-suite because I've made a lot of money sitting between HR and the C-suite as a translator. I want you to go back, rewind like the last minute and a half, and listen to what Kat's telling HR. And you need to understand that needs to be your thing as well. Like I see so often that the C-suite, I'm used to be brought in. It was like, hey, get them to start using this tool. And I was just like you. I was like, you can't. You're starting with the wrong thing. It's like, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? How do we change their mindsets to one, acknowledge that this is a problem, and two, be committed to solving it? And then three and four steps, whatever they are, based off of the organization and the problem, then it's the tool. But I'm seeing so many C suites just going, hey, HR, you need to use this tool. And they're not understanding why they're getting so frustrated because they're not seeing high adoption. It's because they're not actually approaching it the right way. So, C suite, give HR a little bit of a break and go listen to what Kat said, please, for the love of God. Even though I mean, I do miss, the consulting because I made a lot of money doing that kind of stuff. Is like a rinse and repeat. It's like, oh yeah, but at some point, if we're going to transform and evolve, then we need a little bit of heat taken off from the C suite.
Yeah. You can't get great results if you've never defined what the result you're chasing is.
You need that on a t-shirt. That is you need to copyright that, my friend.
Right.
So Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed our time. You mentioned your book, and I've mentioned that I consume your content. But where can people get your book? Where can they connect with you and follow you? Just give us all the digits.
Yeah, so I am the only Katrina Kibben in the world. So if you spell my name right, you will find me. If you spell it wrong, you'll find a priest for the U.S. House of Representatives, and you will know that you are in the wrong place. My company
Talk
is
about
called
two extremes. I love
I,
that.
the joke I like making now for people who can see me when I say that joke is, and we have wildly different haircuts, so you will
Yeah.
know you're looking at the wrong one. And my company is called Three, like the number, ears, like the ones on your head, threeearsmedia.com, and you'll find the blog, the book, and all of our services over there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad we finally made this happen.
Me too.
And hopefully, I will see you at some point. We can grab a drink again.
I am looking forward to it. Thank you, Trent.
All right. Thank you.